Welcome to Grief, Grace, and Gratitude. I'm your host, Rhonda Kemp. On this podcast, we will be sharing our grief journeys with one another. Each one of our guests will talk about the loved ones they've lost to overdose, as well as the impact of substance use disorder. As you listen, you could write down and share with us a question or discussion topic that you would like to see us include in our future episodes. Just as it says in the book of Psalms, chapter 34, verse 18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. My hope is to bring comfort to those who are crushed in spirit. As we talk about the shame of addiction and devastation of loss, we want you to learn how to survive and even thrive while navigating through the difficulty of grief. Welcome. Today we're speaking with Gary Schaefer, and he is actually coming to us on a very important day in his life. This is the 10-year anniversary of his son Eric's passing. Very emotional time, as all of us know. Those dates do creep up on you, and they tend to give you those waves again of emotions. Gary is going to talk about several different things going on in his life now. And Gary, if you'd like to go ahead and share some of the things we've been talking about.
Good morning, Rhonda. Thank you again. Yes, today is the 10th anniversary of Eric's death, and we are doing good. Well, of course, this day is special. We celebrate his life. Eric, who was born in 1985, said he was always born at the wrong time because the music he loved was from the 60s and 70s era. Two of his favorite musicians were the Beatles and Bob Dylan, so we'll play their music today. Eric was a chef, so we'll go out to dinner, and per Eric's instructions, we will leave a nice tip. We'll see family, we'll see the grandkids. They all know who Eric was, that he was a chef. I can see a difference between me and my wife, Marlene. She's already shed some tears today, and I understand that. But we get through the day, and we'll get through it. And I think what has helped us through the years is to understand grief during Eric's addiction years. And as we pray to help our children out of that time, you think you have faith, but at what degree do you have faith? I had to learn to build a relationship with God and understand God. One big thing that got me was, why are so many bad things happening while Eric is going through his addiction years? And in Life's Healing Choices, a book that I had, said, God allows pain to happen to allow you to seek him. So that kind of helped me understand. I mean, that's just a small step of building a relationship with God. And I think that has helped me carry over to his death, because I understand the relationship that I have with Christ and God, and that helps us through. It's a part of life. You learn how to deal with the griefs, and we honor his life now, more or less. We memorize, things he liked to do, and we cherish those. Marlene's going to the store. She's buying the ingredients for his favorite cake. So she's going to bake that cake today, and we'll have it with the grandkids and everybody else. That's how we get through this. That's how we get through this day.
Yeah, and you talked about, and you wrote a book that we'll talk about quite a bit, but it's called A Family Story of Addiction, Death, and Recovery, and the parallels of grief in the addiction, actually, when your son is still with you, and then how that kind of led you into the grief journey after he passed, because addiction is so devastating for a family to go through.
Yes, and I do mention in the book that people have a hard time relating. How can you compare someone's death, your child's death, to something else? And I explain, until you understand what addiction does to a person and the things you have to do as a parent, you will have to make choices that you never dreamed of as a parent that you would have to make. We've had to remove Eric from the house. He has slept on benches. When Marlene and I couldn't get on the same page, he would sleep in the car or in the garage because I didn't want him in the house. And Marlene agreed, because we never knew what was going to be missing next, because they will do anything to fund their use of drugs. And that is on a daily basis. So if you think about grief, it's every day you're wondering, what is he doing? What is he going to do next? Who is he seeing? you're just so wrapped up in your life, a cold, dependent life, which I highly recommend people read about that, where you're wrapped up in another person's life. You are so emotionally attached to them that it takes any sense of peace away from you. And until you're in that on a daily basis, it is devastating, painful. So when we understood what addiction was, we knew death could be a possibility because of the type of drugs that he was using. So once he died, yes, I mean, it's terrible grief, but we went through 10 years of his active using. A therapist told us, you lost 10 years of your marriage, you lost 10 years of interacting with your other children, because you're also wrapped around that person in addiction. And until you understand that grief and that pain, it is devastating when you try to compare it to their death. And we know that we've learned how painful it was for him too, as he was trying to get clean. The guilt. I remember him saying, I wish I could do 11th grade over again. And that resonates me to this day, is how painful for him to make that type of choice back at that age, to put himself in this situation. So we know he's at peace. We know his pain is gone, and we continue living our life and enjoying what is in our life as far as kids and grandkids, because that would make him proud that we are continuing enjoying life.
And when you talk about codependency, do you think the codependency can continue after they've passed?
Oh, yes, it can. If you allow that emotional tie to that person, it can carry over into the life after their death.
Yeah, we talk about people getting stuck in their grief. And, for me, it was definitely God's presence in my grief is what healed me and made me aware that He had something special for my life, separate from being a mom, separate from the journey I took with Lacey and addiction and her death. So I think faith and having that relationship with God is so important to get us past some of the really deep suffering that we have to go through and not get stuck in.
Right. I think you need to surround yourself with the right people. For those who are moving along, I was in a grief group the other day, and I said, I measure my grief, my healing from grief, not in time-wise, but am I making progress? If there was something that Eric loved, and I would engage myself if I could do it 25% of the time. Okay, cool. The next time I would try to push it to 50% of the time. And I kept on trying to grow as far as what I was able to handle after Eric's death. Marlene, there was a restaurant that we like to go to, I like to go to, and I wanted to take her there one day. But it was right next to what we call jams. That was a urine testing for people who were court ordered to get tested. We used to have to take Eric there. Once I pulled into the lot, she says, no. I mean, this was very early after his death. She goes, I can't do this. So I understood that. And then there was another situation, Eric being a chef. There was a store near us with fruits and vegetables and meat market, very big place. He used to love going in there. I mean, it was like a kid in a candy store. Oh, look at all this stuff, and I can prepare this and prepare that. She couldn't go into it at first, but now she can do it. So it's that growth process that you slowly walk into and allow yourself to grow. It doesn't matter. Like I said, I don't count the time. I got to keep on moving forward to get through this grief and get used to it. And I do a lot of things that Eric loved to do, and Marlene does too.
Yeah. And one of the important things, we've talked about is making other people aware of what addiction is as much as you can in the community and in the churches you're trying to reach and just get the message out there. Do you think it's improving how people look at addiction?
That's part of my book. I think my book can, one, help prevent it if people read it and say, because I state in the early chapters, after you read my book, is this a life you want your child to live? And is this a life you want your family to go through? Not quite in those words, but, pretty much that is what I was saying. And I've talked to organizations, and they cannot get parents to show up to prepare themselves. This is what addiction is. They don't hear from parents until their child is already in addiction. As you know, and a lot of us know, at first addiction is a choice, but after a point in time, addiction is no longer a choice. Your body, your mind, your brain is chemically addicted to whatever your substance of choice is, and you will fight it for the rest of your life. You have made a choice for something that will change your life until the day you die. And so I'm not sure if some people just don't want to discuss it. It's a topic they don't want us to discuss. Is there still a stigma to it? I've been trying to get in touch with churches. I've given them my book. I say, read, let me know if you're interested in me and some other professionals. I have Lisa Kaplan, who's a certified addiction advanced counselor for Henry Ford Maple Grove, who's willing to sit in with me. I have Laura Fishman, who's a private practice addiction therapist who's willing to sit in with me and share these ideas, and so people understand addiction. But it just seems like they're not jumping on it, and I really do not understand why. Not Lisa and Laura, of course, but the organizations I have been in touch with. There's a lot of places out there that are giving help after the fact, but we need to get in a prevention mode. I read some facts, some data. 47% of 12th graders actively or have used illicit drugs, alcohol, and vaping. 35% of 10th graders and 25% of 8th graders, and that's according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse. So that was in 2023. When you have figures like that, something's got to be done. And 90% of people who suffer from substance use disorder start prior to the age of 18. So that tells you where we need to focus. And that's another basic fact too, is all the top 5 reasons. Genetics we know is number 1 of why somebody falls into it. But one of the topics or groups is parenting. It says parent guidance, parents' use of drugs, or parents' view on drugs are in the top 5 of why a child may end up falling into addiction. So I think just that data what there tells you where we need to focus. And I'm not totally convinced that talking to kids in school is the total right answer. Does it help? Sure it does. But I look back at when I was 15, 16, 17 years old, 18 years old, we feel we're invincible sometimes, and it just doesn't get to our heads that this is a dangerous path to go down.
Yeah, and everyone thinks it won't happen to them, you know. We pat ourselves on the back of being good parents. You know, we read books, we went through the healthy pregnancy, we thought we had them in church. We checked off all the boxes to my child won't be in danger, but that's a naive way to look at what addiction is and how prevalent it can be. And it doesn't matter what background you come from or how much money your parents have or what schools you went to. It can show up in many, many people in those circles.
I think as parents, sometimes we view a certain group of people as those more liable to fall into addiction, where when you think about the well-off, they got the money to fall into it. But Eric told us stories afterwards when he was clean and sober of the things that he did to try and get drugs. Boy, just shocking. Just the parts of town he went into to get his fix. Unbelievable.
Well, I'm glad you're trying to do prevention and be a part of that story, because that's the most, with the epidemic of what we're dealing with, that's the most important thing. And I encourage all the moms and dads that have lost a child to use their energy for that if they can, you know, find a way to be a part of that solution.
I'm hoping, even if you've already lost your child, and we can all do something to prevent. And I think my book has given people a tool to, here, read this book. Understand what, now Gary doesn't get into specifics, but he tells you what the world is like of your child going down this path. And you can give it as a gift or just give it to someone and say, really understand what is going on here. Because, like I said, parents just don't realize it until it falls into their lap.
I just really thought that it was never going to touch a family, you know, that was working hard to do all the right things and there was no alcohol or drugs used in the home or, you know,
Yep.
I thought that was just a sure bet that that would not be part of our story. But through an operation my daughter had, an introduction to opioids, that started it. And then the world, is just in your 20s, the world is a big free landscape for a young adult to try everything or experiment. And she was curious about things. So you just you're not prepared as a parent, and you need to really consider it could be your story too.
Yeah. I had a therapist on my YouTube channel, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but we were talking about using in the kids that they work with. And she made an interesting point. She goes, I'm not a prude, okay? I mean, we've gone through the drinking at a certain age and everything else, but she basically said, be smart. Think a little bit. That pill you take from that person or whatever it may be, because I know of stories, I'm sure you're aware of stories where someone decides to take a pill one time and it's cut with fentanyl or who knows what else. And that mother and father have lost a child. So she tries to educate them and say, be smart when you're out there, just because we've heard too many stories of kids taking Adderall to study at night and they don't wake up in the morning because it's cut.
I
So,
just shared my story in the film Dead on Arrival with a small Christian school in North Carolina where my brother's the principal, and you could have heard a pin drop in that room when that movie was finished. It's 22-minute video on YouTube called Dead on Arrival, and it talks about
I'm gonna have to look on that.
it's about the fentanyl crisis and what parents are experiencing, just like you says. They get on Snapchat and think they're ordering Xanax or an Adderall or anything, one pill, and it kills them.
Yeah. Well, the fentanyl's been around for a long time, but it's now more actively involved because of the Oxycontins and the Vicodins and all these type of painkiller type drugs. But the Purdue Pharma definitely put us in a bad situation. Unfortunately, some because of doctors prescribing it. Unfortunately for me, Eric experimenting with drinking, smoking, and then getting his hands on morphine and other things just to get that high.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about your book. The healing chapter was really interesting to me just because in our retreat, I talk with parents and mostly moms that don't know really how to honor their child after they've passed. It's not something that everybody's creative about, but you and your wife have come up with some great ways to honor Eric and keep his memory alive and way far and above the norm, I would say, as far as the different steps you've gone through to just make his life so special and remembered. In your book, there's pictures of a little bear that you made out of Eric's clothes for each grandchild with the picture of Eric on it. I thought that was such a great idea.
And not only the bear, now like you said, every grandchild has a bear made of Eric's clothing with his little picture on it. But since Eric was a chef, every one of them at a certain age gets a chef coat and hat. Every once in a while, their parents, our kids, will send us a picture of them cooking something in the kitchen with their little chef coat and hat on. So we get the biggest kick out of that. And there's a culinary store near us that has cooking classes. And when you're 7 years old, you can take a cooking class. Well, Marlene already took our oldest one, who made a chicken parm and pasta. And so as each grandchild reaches 7 years old, she's going to take him for a cooking class. So that's one of the ways that we honor. And his culinary tools, we've divided them up amongst the three of us, and we use them to cook with. Now, there was someone who said, well, maybe you should leave a empty chair at the table. We says, no, that we can't handle. So we got a special candle globe, and we have a candle that we light for Eric on his birthday, on his anniversary of his death, on Christmas and Easter and all that type of deal. So those are some of the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, and doesn't it say something special on it, the candle holder?
Is all you need is love, because he was a huge Beatle fan. So that's engraved on the glass globe, if you want to call it, for his candle. Yeah.
And At his funeral, he had everybody wear Beatles shirts and the bands that he liked, the T-shirts. So
Yeah.
when you look at that T-shirt, they remember Eric, whoever wore that day. So
On his funeral, we asked people to wear a T-shirt of like Beatles, Johnny Cash, Dylan, and some other ones, and a majority wore them. And in fact, a guy I used to work with, and I had already left my job for a period of time, he showed up wearing all black, and he goes, I didn't have a T-shirt, but I wore all black for Johnny Cash. So I thought that was pretty neat.
with this good ideas. And then you made a scholarship available for the community college for culinary.
Yes, we had been in touch with the college, and they've been very supportive. They've let me speak at the college on it. We have a scholarship for the culinary team when they compete. In fact, they actually go to Europe to compete. It's a junior college, but it's widely recognized as a very good culinary school, and that's where Eric went. We started that, and we donate to that along with other causes for the school, kids who may not financially be able to afford it. So so giving and sharing our story to others really helps us heal along with that, remembering them.
Yeah, the giving back, it definitely takes you out of your small pity party that you can get into when you're helping other people, and you're really doing a good job with that, and the book is doing great.
I'm going to be a little bit honest on this one. I've gotten good feedback from personal people through text or that type of deal, but I'm surprised that the sales has not been robust as I would have liked to see. And I don't know if this goes back to what I talk about parents not wanting to be educated on addiction. Is this parents who don't want to relive what they went through? But even if you don't want to read it, you can give it to people that you know that their kids are in those teenage years or 10 years old or 12 years old to make sure you really got to be aware of what's going on here. Because I really believe if they read this, they're going to say, I want no part of this. So I'm hoping eventually things will get better, and I'm hoping this podcast will help get that word out a little bit more. Say, hey, maybe this is a book that I need to read.
Yeah, that's why we do this, just to reach out to those people that don't know what to do. You're suffering, you don't have a grief group. We have Hope After Loss that we pour ourselves into for retreats and meetings and Zoom calls, and we pick up new parents and siblings and any loved one that's lost someone to overdose related death. And there's a lot of us, it's not such a small group.
Oh, I do believe my book will help people think about preventing and keeping track of things. Lisa, the addiction counselor, sent me a list of the 30 things to look for.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of information out there. It's, okay, this is what I need to look for when my child may not be acting normally. But not only preventing, but I think it'll help people heal, as we just talked about healing of the things that we have done to help. I also share a lot of God winks, and they're pretty neat. They really are.
There's a lot of stories about God winks. Most all of us get them. So,
I tell this story, and I read a book, Life After Life, and other books about life after death. And I was watching TV, and I said, I wonder if there's anything on. So I started to scroll, and I found a program, To Heaven and Back, I believe it was. And it was a story about people who had clinically been pronounced dead, but they were revived. And they talk about what it's like in the afterlife. And we've heard stories like this of how beautiful it was and the unconditional love and the warmth and everything else. So I text Marlene and I said, you should watch this. I recorded it. I says, you should watch this. So she came home and she watched it and she goes, it really did make me feel better. So we're getting ready for bed and she comes out of her bathroom and her voice is kind of crackly. And we have this book that we bought where we journal and we just write to Eric. And that's one of the things that helped me heal is I write on a day, we, not as much, but we used to write to Eric and just talk. She was my last entry a few days ago. I asked Eric to give me a glimpse of heaven. And after she wrote that is when I told her to watch that program. I mean, you just you kind of get chills down your back of your neck, And we have a special song since he was a Beatles fan. Here Comes the Sun, and I have a complete chapter on how that song is prevalent in our life, and not just ours, but friends talk about when they hear that song at, certain times. It's just like uncanny of how did this song come up at this point in time in my life. So there's a lot of God winks, I think, that are pretty neat in my book that people would. And I think if you stay in that grief, that heavy grief, you just miss them because you're seeing the gloom and the sorrow instead of the good things.
Yeah, you have to take steps away from that dark circle you're in. One of the therapists I quoted from a book I read, you're in this dark circle of suffering and grief, and it's all around you, and you're going to be in that. It's not like you get to step out of it, but you can make the circle bigger and make light and joy around that circle and start new things and new hobbies and new people and new adventures and expand yourself. So it's not that you just have the dark, but you have this big circle of light around you also. That makes it doable. You can do life that way. And remember that you're always going to grieve. You're always going to miss them. You're always going to want to touch their hand and hear their voice. But we have so many other things God's got for us, on top of just this dark sadness.
There's too many other people in our lives that we don't want to give them a secondary loss to. We have children, and if we withdraw from them and our grandchildren, are we not adding to their grief? Sometimes I remember on the grief group that I'm on Facebook, I brought up about you got to pay attention to your children. They still need a mother. They still need a father. And a mother wrote on there, she basically said, thank you for posting this. She goes, my husband eventually had to just be blunt with me and say, you got 2 other kids here who need a mother, not somebody who's going to be grieving all the time and in some type of bad, the world is ending type mood. The one that got me the most was this mother said, boy, I made the statement, I wish I'd die or something of that so I could be with my son. Her daughter turned to her and said, so you'd rather die and be with him instead of live and be with me. So
that tells a lot,
that really impacted me. I mean, sometimes people just have to be, and this is the difference between, I think, a male and a female. A male can be somewhat blunt to the point to say something. And someone told me, if somebody really cares about you, they will say something because they care about your health, and you've got to listen to them.
Yeah, that's the reality of our pit we get into, and it can be very selfish, that.
Oh, yes.
And it's not that you just get to decide when that's going to happen. I don't.
No.
When I was grieving, it wasn't like, next year, this time I'm going to be like this and this. It will happen as you get up every day and try to push forward just a little bit, just small things. And God will bring you new things in your life. He'll bring you new peace and new joy. But you do have to participate. You have to get on your knees and ask him.
Participate. And that's a very good way to put it. I knew this father who lost his son, and he grieved heavily for years. I mean, I talked to his daughter, and basically he never came out of his house except to go to the gravesite. And the way I view this is, if you don't participate in life, how can God put people in your life to help you work through all of this? And if you can't get out of bed in the morning, eventually start pushing yourself to get out.
Yeah.
Just get out. If you can't go outside somewhere down the road, push yourself to go outside. It will be painful, but I think you will start to heal too.
Yeah, that is a sign that, to me, if I was going to give up my true sadness of the debilitating sadness, I was going to give up her. I gave myself that false idea that as soon as I do get out of bed, as soon as I do stop crying, and move a little forward, I'm going to be walking away from her, my daughter.
Yeah.
Not true. I'm 10 and a half years and I don't ever miss a moment of thinking about her and remembering her, and I can see her face and hear her laugh, and I haven't moved away from her because I'm not in that deep, sad place. So that's something that it's just not true. You have to remember.
Yeah. And if you have faith, you will see them again. A therapist told me an interesting thing. We talked about parents and a sibling. And she goes, you have to think about this as a sibling. if you lose a sibling, like for us to lose our parents, we didn't know our parents when they were young. We only picked up after our certain age and their certain age. But siblings have known each other for their entire life. They know their childhood, they know their teenage years or whatever years are involved in them. So they encompass that person's entire life. So for them, the grief can really be devastating. And sometimes I think the parents get all the attention from other people about the grief, but the siblings can be just as devastated of losing a best friend or whatever it may be, because they share things that we'll never know. And
Yeah.
I don't want to know.
They have all the fun secrets mom and dad know nothing about. And that's a person you're supposed to go to your grave knowing is your siblings. That's a
Yeah.
lifelong relationship.
Yes, it is. It is.
On this podcast, I have an episode. Let me think of her name now. She's a sibling and she lost her brother 17 years ago, Bree Schrader. And she does a fantastic job of talking about the sibling loss.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it is. Well, I want to leave with just a little bit more about a family story of addiction, death, and recovery that can be purchased on Amazon. There's so many good things in there just about addiction. And just if you know someone that's suffering with addiction, like you said, it doesn't have to be the parent or, it can just be someone you know is struggling. And let that family know that there is help out there for us. Before the loss, there's help out there to help detach with love and also not be codependent. That's major because when you're in that codependency stage, your life just gets put on hold. Everything about your life is stopped.
Oh, yes. And I discuss about Al-Anon, Celebrate Recovery, and other programs I went through. Like I said, that book can help you if you're not in this world yet to learn about it. But if you're already in this world, I talk about how Al-Anon helped me take care of myself. I talk about recovery from a faith to understand my relationship with God. And importantly, understand addiction because I did tough love the wrong way. And I don't know if that happened in your circumstance, but you think if you turn the screws on them and I'm going to straighten them out, you are not going to force a person in addiction to think straight or do what you want them to do because you've lost control of the whole situation. And you have to learn the steps. You don't ask somebody who's not familiar with addiction. You ask somebody who understands addiction, therapists, counselors, whatever it may be. But
there's lots of good information too on YouTube and TED Talks about the brain disease of addiction. And we have so much information now that we didn't have 10 years ago.
No, we didn't. Well, that for me, I was in the blind. I knew nothing about Oxycontin or painkiller medication. I had no idea what Eric was going through until I sat through a clinic that explained to me what Eric was going through. Well, he's already in addiction, so I was behind the eight ball. So now I'm fighting that.
And having that gift of education, you were able to have some good years with him sober and not be judgmental and not be shaming him. I know families that even when their child is sober for a year, 2, 3 years, they're still treating them like a failure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I expressed that in my book. I treated him like an adult. I treated him as a human being. I didn't degrade him like I did earlier because you don't know what to do if you don't seek the help of how I need to handle this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have to wrap up, and I'm glad we got to discuss some of these really important things. We all need to be educated. Even if it never touches your family, be ready for it. Just like you're educated to help your child not get kidnapped. We prepare and we talk to our kids about what to do when a stranger approaches them. This is a stranger. This addiction is the stranger. Prepare your family just in case.
It's a very dangerous stranger, too. I talk about parents do so much for what college are they going to go to? What sports are you playing? I mean, all these other activities, they put all this resources into. And the one thing that can damage the child for the rest of their life, they don't dig into it and understand what it is. Yeah. And I think my book here will explain that to you about what we went through. You do not want to live the life that we went through.
No. And it is a terrific story to read, and you did a great job doing that. In the darkness of grief, that all came out. So praise God for what you've done. And
Yes, definitely praise. Yeah.
thank you, Gary.
Thank you for the time, Rhonda.
Okay, we'll talk again. Enjoy your family today on your special day of 10 years. I'm glad you'll be together with the big family.
I'm going to enjoy dinner and that cake.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for being a part of the Grief, Grace, and Gratitude community. Remember, God has not forgotten you, your dreams, or your broken heart. Join us for our next episode, available wherever you listen to podcasts. To help us reach more people, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social media. What will you trust God with today?